Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope everyone had a restful sleep and after a fun evening. Some people got to enjoy Dr. John playing on his guitar across the street. It's a fun time. And some people were able to wake up early and enjoy beach time, and sand and the waves and dolphins and yoga. I'm really looking forward to today. Today is going to be a fantastic, information-filled day of just, I think, a continued expansion, right, of our awareness, our consciousness, our understanding of what's out there and what is possible. And so in our first presenter today, I always love the Brazilian energy that comes into the BodyTalk system. I love Brazil. If you've yet to have the opportunity to get down to Brazil and check out some of those lands and people and places down there, it's a wonderful, wonderful place. So I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Paola Ranova. Dr. Paola Ranova is a certified BodyTalk practitioner, and she's an adjunct professor at the University of Brazil. She has actually been licensed to come to the United States. She was licensed in 2014 to come to the United States to research both consciousness and other energy modalities. So that's quite an amazing thing, I think, from a U.S. perspective. I don't know if anywhere in the United States would ever license someone to go somewhere else to study those things. She's also the developer of the Cardinal method of life connection, which she's going to be sharing with us today, and sharing how that ties in with the BodyTalk system and the work that we do. So the Cardinal method brings in a lot of different ideas, from sacred geometry. There's Native American principles involved with this, really working with the soul of the family and the soul of the bigger groups of energies. Working with sacred geometry, as I said, and sounds and crystals. Standing here next to these crystals, it's so easy, right, as I was walking up here before, it's so easy to just walk by and not really think about them, just walk by and think, oh, not a big deal. But then when I bring my awareness to these, oh my gosh, what is happening over here? So just how that shift of awareness, right, just can make all the difference in the world. So actually, before I invite Dr. Paola up here to speak, I'd just like to invite everyone to come back to some of the exercises that we learned yesterday that were reinforced really by both Tracy and Howard during their presentations. So if we can take a moment to drop down into our hearts, take a few deep breaths, breathing in and out of the heart. And feeling that gratitude, appreciation, compassion, respect, all these qualities of the heart. And feeling that heart energy just radiating out from you to the people sitting next to you, to the room, to the hotel, beyond. And with this heart energy, please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Paola.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here. It's such an honor. I'm very grateful for the BodyTalk system to welcome me and my research in such a beautiful matrix and such a beautiful protocol. So as Ben was saying, I've been here for 3 years researching how the Cardinal method crystals and the Cardinal method energy combines with the BodyTalk protocol on one hand, and with family constellations, which is another healing modality on the other hand. So I need to ask a question. Who here has been to a family constellation before? So you know it's collective work, it's group work, right? And we'll be doing a demo here. I will talk about the theory, and we'll work with the BodyTalk matrix in a constellation setting with Cardinal method crystals at the end of my talk. So some of you will probably be picked to come here and represent energies so that we see a shift happening. Okay? So for those of you who have been to constellation before, this is different because it's Cardinal method constellation. Meaning, we'll be using crystals in the field. So the first thing I want to tell you is that crystal energy is very powerful. It's a very high vibrational frequency energy. It is consciousness, but it's not self-aware consciousness. But they align us with the best of life. I really compare what crystals do to what BodyTalk calls natural consciousness of the body. So the crystals bring us back to a state of health, well-being, and alignment with the truth. Okay? The Cardinal method is a system I've developed for 25 years, and I've been working with it in a practical sense, and actually turned it into a career for the past 10 years. And one of the things I need to tell you before I start talking about the system and the method is that just hearing about the theory, especially family constellation theory, may trigger healing in your soul just by learning the theory. So if you feel like you are releasing energy, it's part of the process, it's part of the healing, and trust, it's a good thing. Because one of the things I've noticed in my research in these 3 years is that, first of all, crystals are catalyzers. If you use crystals in BodyTalk sessions, they will accelerate the process of healing. Things happen really fast when we include the crystals. Second of all, they also soothe emotional pain, which is one of the reasons I bring the crystals to constellations, is because if you've been to a constellation, you know how the emotional discharge is so intense, and we can take a long time to recover. But when we use crystals in those settings, it's a 48-hour process of purging because they will purge emotions and energy and stagnant energy, but it's faster. So they are tools that help the process be more soothing and deeper. And one of the things that actually triggered the whole Cardinal method development is a Native American wisdom that I wanted to test. So as a scientist, we want to see if things really work. Right? So I was just scratching the surface of this whole thing with my research, but I can tell you from the results that I've had that this principle that crystals bring the truth forth is actually true. The truth emerges in the presence of crystals. But we'll talk more about that as I talk about the Cardinal method with you. So the Cardinal method is a consciousness expansion and soul healing system. What does that mean? When we talk about constellations, they are about releasing the past so you're not entangled with past pain from past generations. With the Cardinal method, it's not just that, but it's also expanding your awareness as an individual. So it's not just about the family soul, which is a collective belonging, but it's also about your individual choice not to repeat past pain, which we do in an unconscious level. As it was said yesterday, the unconscious mind is addicted to repeating past pain, right? So we can, as individuals, be aware of that and not repeat that. and create new history in the family and for ourselves. It's an energy alignment system, meaning that we work with sacred geometry. We know that the body has energetic frequencies, not just physical, but also subtle. And crystals align the subtle and the physical body. I know we need more research about that, more people intending to observe, especially on the physical body. My focus is more on the subtle bodies and the soul. But I'm sure we will be amazed in how crystals work with the physical body, with the experts that are interested in that field. Okay. So the Cardinal method is based on the power of crystals. It's based on 25 years of my research, and for 10 years it's been empirical. It's multidisciplinary, based in geometry and divine proportions. So I just want to tell you this. The Renaissance had a lot of beautiful things to bring to humanity, and one of the influences of the Cardinal method is Leonardo da Vinci. You know the Vitruvian Man, right? The proportion and the idea of divine proportion. Crystals bring that energy to our lives. We react more proportionally to things on the emotional level. So it's very much about proportion, and I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. Second thing is that in a Cardinal method perspective, the soul is a geometric canvas or a blueprint of energy. So the soul is geometrical. The energetic existence of the soul includes geometry in this perspective. It's theory, still it's theory, but you'll see how it works as we have the demo. Another thing that's very important with crystals, they're tools of alignment in the geometric perspective. So it aligns the energy blueprints. The colors of crystals are very important for the soul. So this, for me, is intuitive. But when you see a crystal, you have to pay attention to the internal geometry to see which system it belongs to, and also the color. So you have two different crystals like aquamarine and amazonite. They're the same color hue. The color is healing the soul. So if you can see here, we have, this is a glass pillar, a green glass pillar. It's called obsidian. It's not real obsidian. It's glass. But obsidian is an amorphous crystal. It doesn't have an internal geometry. Like resins, like amber, like pearl, like shells. But it has the color, so it's benefiting the soul. The alignment from the geometric perspective is benefiting the energetic blueprint. Okay? The third thing that's very important are the sounds we make when we put our focus in healing with crystals. Meaning, the geometry is there, the color is healing the soul, and the affirmations we make in that scenario will bring the healing, will bring the choice for alignment. So when you're in a BodyTalk session with a client, using stones in their hands, and you have an active memory about the Father, and you tell the client, just say, thank you for my life, you are my Father, that will resonate in the soul in such a way that those grudges and those very painful memories will go away faster. So sounds are important. What you say in the presence of crystals with intention is very healing. The Cardinal method has 4 pillars. The family constellation as inspiration, Native American wisdoms, the Hindu chakra system, and contemporary concepts of the human psyche. Meaning when we have any Cardinal method session, all of these inspirations are there. So when we have a Cardinal method constellation, Native American wisdoms will be there, the chakra systems will be aligned, and the human psyche, meaning the inner child, the ego, what I call the real self and the higher self. So what is that? We have an inner child within us that may be in charge of our lives, and we may not know that. So when we eat too much and when we have no discipline with money, for instance, you can be sure your inner child is in charge of some areas of your life. The rational ego is the one that says no to the magic of life. So whenever you're doubtful or skeptical about spirituality, and about love, and about connection, when you choose separation, you can be sure your ego is probably in charge. We're not trying to get rid of any of these aspects of the psyche, we're trying to balance them. As I said before, it's about proportion. We want to include these aspects, but they cannot be in charge of our lives unless they are the real self, which is our state of being in the present moment, without masks, without defenses, but with our flaws. So when we engage in spiritual paths, when we try to be better people, we want to be perfect. And that's not a real self in a human condition, right? So when you embrace your flaws and your aspects that need healing, you're being real. You're being a real person. And that's what we want to reach with the Cardinal Method crystals. Your real being, without masks. Not the inner child, because that's a past reality. And not the ego, because that's just a tool to be an adult. But the real self integrates it all. And that's what we're trying to get to. The spiritual higher self, in my perspective, and again, this is just one perspective, is the flawless, divine flame we have inside. And we access that through the real self. Not through the inner child and not through the ego. So the first step is to be in touch with the real self so that we can connect to the higher self. This is what I just said. So there are 4 ways in a Cardinal Method perspective to reach that state of being. So these are 4 types of sessions, individual sessions that I have developed. So aside from this, we can also align the crystals with the BodyTalk protocol and with constellations. So the first type of sessions that we have in Cardinal Method session perspectives are visualizing the soul, which include family constellation principles, meaning we align and heal the soul, and I will talk more about this when we talk about constellations. Because the constellations have an idea of the soul that is not what we're used to. It's a different perspective. We can align Cardinal Method crystals with Native American wisdoms, which is how we connect to the external world, and I'll talk about that as well. To the Hindu chakra systems, how we align the chakras, and I'll also tell you how that works with the family system and the aspects of the psyche. So the first thing we need to know about consciousness in a Cardinal Method perspective. There are 3 levels. And the first level, surprisingly, is not individual. It's collective, what I call functional consciousness. What does that mean? When we're born into the family soul, into the family consciousness. So that's a given. It's something that we don't choose in this life. It's something we're born in. It's the scenario we're born in. The second level is individual, when you start to develop self-awareness. And the third is universal, which is the cosmic understanding of the world. The soul, in the Cardinal Method perspective, is the same concept that they use in constellations. Meaning, we don't just have an individual soul. We belong to a family soul. So I like to use the image of an ocean and icebergs. So the family you're born in, your family, is like an ocean, water, that the icebergs float on. So you're an iceberg, your mom's an iceberg, your dad's an iceberg. Everyone in your family is solidified water floating in a liquid soul or the ocean. When we die, we just melt into that soul in a human condition perspective. I'm not talking about past lives or spirituality. This is about the human condition. The family soul has an archaic consciousness, and this is where we start to get emotional. Because the archaic consciousness of the soul follows 3 principles that our Western culture has forgotten, especially in the past 300 years in history. When we became excessively rational with industrial mass cultures, we have excluded a spiritual life. We have excluded religion and spirituality, and we have become rational human beings who think the physical world is all there is. That physical matter is reality. And anything that transcends physical matter is illusion, is a lie, is superstitious thought, is just crazy woohoo fairy talk. When that happened to our Western culture, we have excluded not just the magic of life, but a very important aspect of reality, which is spirituality, right? And consciousness and self-awareness. And a lot of the good things of life have been excluded from us. The archaic consciousness of the soul is very primitive. And for us, it's not very fair to the new generations. What does it mean? First of all, we don't have a soul. We belong to a family soul. Is this clear? Is the whole image of an ocean and icebergs floating clear? Okay. Second of all, like gravity for physical matter, if I grab a crystal and drop it, it will drop because there is gravity. Physical matter obeys certain laws and principles. So does the archaic soul. So Beth Hellinger, who's the creator of family constellations, he was a Benedictine priest, he was a Catholic priest, and he was a missionary in South Africa for 16 years. And with the Zulu culture, he learned very, very archaic knowledge that he said, well, and he was also a philosopher, a German philosopher, so the whole idea of an individual was very important to him, and he said, well, guess what? The Zulus just taught me that we are wrong in our Western culture. We are not independent individuals. We are much more collective than we think. And we are guided by a family soul and a family logic that is at least 4 generations back, and it determines most of our behavior. And we may be entangled in something that happened with my great-grandmother or with my grandmother, and I don't even know. In my experience with this work, every single case of rape was a repetition, a family loyalty of something that had happened to the mother or the grandmother or the great-grandmother. So children engage in family loyalty in that sense, meaning the unconscious mind is still active. If it was a secret, that's even worse, and we'll talk about that soon. So children know the truth. When we're born, when we're in the womb, we know the truth of a family. If it's not official, we know regardless. We feel it in our gut. And children are love. They have no wisdom and they have no power. So as a child, all I will try to do is to try to diminish the pain of my grandmother who had a horrible episode in her life. And nobody knows about it, but we know in the heart. And children try to save that grandmother. So they go back in time. They go to that past experience, repeat it in their own lives to say to the grandmother, I'm here with you in your pain. And that's the love of the child. So if you can see this stone here, this is what Hellinger calls the immature love of the child. It's a blind love. I will give up my life for you. If the child is born and 3 siblings who were older were not born, they still exist to the family soul. They belong. And this child over here may be feeling guilty to have been born if 3 siblings were not. So how dare I be alive if my older brothers and sisters are not? In my experience, all cases of crack addiction, when you see a constellation, unborn siblings. And it's a family secret. Men sometimes don't know they got a girl pregnant in high school. They terminate the pregnancy without telling the guy. But that child exists for the soul. And the energy is not represented. It will be represented in the child that sees that with the eyes of the heart. And will leave her place and size in the family and go there and try to rescue the unborn brother or sister. So they say, okay, I was born, I have a body, but I will live your life script. I will give part of my life to you. It's more complex than what I'm saying, but it's just a general idea for you to get context. So, the archaic soul of humanity, this is a universal condition for us, has three principles like laws of gravity for matter. The three principles that we are very unaware of are, first of all, hierarchy. And they're very simple. As I always say in my sessions, life is simple. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's very simple. The first principle is hierarchy, meaning your mom is bigger than you. Any questions? Your dad is bigger than you. Any questions? The grandfather is even bigger. So hierarchy, if you can see these stones over here, you are small, your father is big, your grandfather is bigger. Any questions? What is our problem? If the mother has an inconsistent behavior, has a problematic personality, the mother's an alcoholic, the mother abandoned you, adopted people have a very hard time with constellations because the pain of abandonment is almost unbearable. The mother was inconsistent because the grandmother died when she was 4 years old. So there is an empty space here. When this woman has a girl, this girl will say, oh my God, when you were 4, your mom was out of this world. What should I do? I'll take care of you. So this child is not respecting the principle of hierarchy. Can she handle this? So as I said, life is simple in a proportional way because big ones take care of small ones. It's like a tribal mindset, but it's true, right? If you take emotional care of your parents, you're disrespecting a principle of the soul and you'll not be a happy person. Because there are two ways to live in this perspective. You either carry the weight or you take the strength. It's the same energy. You carry the weight on your shoulders or you take the strength. You make your parents the bow and you're the arrow and you go. A lot of people I know don't leave the bow. Some just like the father and hate the mother, so the arrow is going to go in a very lopsided direction. Not your life purpose, not your path. So in a soul perspective, when we honor mother and father, and again, Hellinger was a priest, so this is a very Christian thing, the commandments, right? The fourth commandment, honor mother and father. That's all you need to do for your life to work. Is hierarchy understood? Yeah? You are small, your parents are big. All right. The second principle that you can see here is the right to belong. Belonging is a huge issue for constellations. What does it mean? Again, as I said, life is simple. Everybody belongs. Any questions? The thing is, we have official members of the family and non-official members. And the soul holds a lot more people than we think. So, if you have a couple who has 2 beautiful children, like a margarine commercial, the mother had 2 miscarriages. The father had 3 abortions. How many kids does this family soul have? How many kids does this family soul hold? Not just 2 official ones, right? 5 excluded members. The weight of that energy is huge on a child. And it's called the guilt of the survivor when that child cannot handle the weight. So they go into drugs, for instance. I'm not saying that every drug addiction is that situation. I'm just saying that when we see the soul, it's very common. So the right to belong includes any person that had a bond with you. So if there was a pregnancy, you're bonded. That person belongs. And that person is a father figure or a mother figure to your child, even if it's 20 years later. Because the soul knows no time. And for the soul, it doesn't matter if you're dead or alive either. So your mother is very present in your life, even if she's not in a physical living body. For the soul, it doesn't matter. And since, in Hellinger's perspective, you go back 4 generations, you're sharing the same unconscious mind as your great-grandmother. So you feel her pain as if it was your own. Not your individual experience, but it belongs to your soul because you share the same soul. Family secrets are a huge one. They create what we call a wound in the family soul. So your great-grandmother may be dead, but her pain is alive. And it can manifest as a disease in your body. It's very common. Kids with cancer, every time I've seen constellations with children who develop any kind of cancer, always a systemic issue. Always. Someone is not a biological child, there's a family secret, something is going on. Now, Hellinger says we have to treat these issues with respect and not judgment. And again, this is the magic of a constellation, and the crystals help with that in the Cardinal method. When we're in the blind love of the child, we are engaging in solving problems in the soul. It's what Hellinger calls arrogance. So he says that problems of humanity have, if they can be pinpointed to one single word, the word is arrogance. Because as a child, we sense, we feel unconsciously all the problems in the family. And suppose this person had an affair with this person. The child knows and feels it all. We feel the truth in the heart. We know. Heart knows. And this child can say, how unconsciously, how dare you do this? And judge an older person in the system. That's the immature love of the child. So in a constellation process, what we do is we engage in a broader sense of love. We consent to reality as it is. We say to the mother, you've done something that is not moral, and that's very subjective, or you are an alcoholic, it doesn't matter, you gave me life. I don't care what happened in the past, I will not judge the family wounds. I will take it all as strength and move forward. Most of us who have problems are judging past issues in a family soul. We're entangled in the past because the other generations have disrespected hierarchy or the right to belong. Or the third principle, which is